Welcome, my amazing friends. Today I bring you a story that will touch your heart and inspire your soul. Have you ever wondered how one man, with no money, no home, and no parents, became the most loved comedian in the world? This is not just a story. It is a journey of laughter, tears, and dreams. It is the story of a boy who slept hungry, who walked the streets without shoes, who had no father to guide him and no mother to protect him. And yet, this same boy grew up to make kings, queens, rich men, poor men, and children all over the world laugh with tears of joy. His name is written in golden letters in the history of cinema. He gave the world something more powerful than wealth, more lasting than fame. He gave the gift of laughter. My dear friends, in this journey you will not only learn about his life, but also improve your English step by step as you listen. Watch till the end, because every moment of this story will bring you closer to understanding why Charlie Chaplin is not just an actor, not just a comedian, but a legend who will live forever in our hearts. Are you ready? Let's begin. Chapter 1. A Boy from the Streets of London. Charlie Chaplin was born on April 16, 1889, in London, England. It was not a day that the world noticed. No newspapers wrote about it. No one expected that this small baby would one day become the most famous comedian in the history of cinema. At that time, London was a city of two worlds. On one side, there was wealth, music halls, theaters, and rich people wearing elegant clothes. On the other side, there were narrow streets, dirty rooms, and children begging for food. Charlie was born into the second world, the world of struggle, of hunger, of poverty. His parents, Hannah Chaplin and Charles Chaplin Sr., were both performers. They lived in the world of music and theater. His father was a singer, known in the pubs and music halls of London. His mother was a talented actress and singer, performing small roles and singing for crowds. At first, it looked like Charlie was lucky. His parents were artists. They lived near the stage, and he was surrounded by music and acting. But life is not always kind. His father was an alcoholic, a man who spent more time drinking than caring for his family. When Charlie was still very small, his father abandoned them. He left his wife and two children, Charlie and his older half-brother Sidney, to survive on their own. Charlie's mother, Hannah, tried her best to care for her children. She worked hard, performing on small stages, singing in theaters, hoping to earn enough to buy bread and milk. But the money was never enough. Many nights, little Charlie went to bed hungry. Sometimes, his mother pretended to eat less, just to make sure her children had a little more food. Imagine a small boy lying in bed with an empty stomach, hearing his mother quietly crying because she had no food to give. That was Charlie's childhood. The family moved from one poor room to another, always afraid of being thrown out because they could not pay rent. The streets were dirty, cold, and full of other hungry children. Charlie and Sidney had to fight every day to survive. For a short time, they lived in the workhouses of London. Workhouses were terrible places where the poor were sent to do hard labor in exchange for food and shelter. Charlie was only 7 years old when he first experienced this. Children were separated from parents, forced to work, and treated like prisoners. The little boy who once dreamed of the stage was now just another child in rags, standing in line for a piece of bread. But even in this darkness, Charlie had a spark. He was small, weak, and poor, but he had a gift. He could make people laugh. When other children cried, Charlie would make faces, dance funny steps, or pretend to be a rich man walking proudly with a stick. For a moment, the children forgot their hunger. For a moment, they laughed. And in that moment, Charlie discovered something powerful. Laughter could heal pain. Still, life continued to test him. His mother's health began to fail. Years of poverty, stress, and sadness broke her spirit. One terrible night, while performing on stage, Hannah lost her voice. She tried to sing, but her voice cracked. The audience grew angry. They shouted. They demanded she leave the stage. It was a cruel moment. But something extraordinary happened. A little boy, just 5 years old, walked onto the stage. It was Charlie. He picked up the microphone. He began to sing. He danced. He made funny faces. The angry audience fell silent. Then they began to laugh. Then they clapped. The theater was filled with joy, not anger. For the first time, Charlie stood in front of a crowd. For the first time, he felt the magic of performing. And deep in his young heart, he knew, this is what I was born to do. But fate was not finished with him. Soon after, his mother's condition grew worse. She lost her voice completely and could no longer work. The stress was too much, and slowly her mind began to break. Charlie was still a child, but he watched helplessly as his mother was taken away to a mental hospital. He cried, he screamed, but there was nothing he could do. He was alone, with only his brother Sidney by his side. Imagine this scene for a moment, a small boy, walking through the streets of London at night. His clothes are torn, his shoes are broken, his stomach is empty. He looks into trash bins, hoping to find something to eat. He has no father, his mother is gone, and the world seems heartless. That was Charlie Chaplin, a boy who had nothing, but still dreamed of the stage. Many people in his position would have given up. They would have accepted a life of poverty. But Charlie refused. Even in his pain, he carried a dream inside him. He remembered the night on stage when people laughed at his little performance. He remembered the feeling of joy, the sound of applause, the warmth of laughter. He wanted more. He wanted to stand on stage again. He wanted to make the world laugh. And so, in the middle of his hunger and sadness, a new Charlie was being born. The boy who walked the dirty streets of London would one day walk the grand stages of Hollywood. The child who searched trash cans for food would one day become the richest actor in the world. The little boy who made a crowd laugh at 5 years old was preparing to change cinema forever. But that was the future. For now, he was still just a poor child of London, hungry, abandoned, and dreaming. His story was only beginning. Chapter 2: Dreams in Darkness. After Charlie's mother was taken away to the hospital, life became even harder. Charlie was still a child, but he and his older brother Sidney now had to survive on their own. They had no father to guide them, no mother to protect them, and no money to keep them safe. The streets of London became their home, and every day was a fight for survival. Charlie and Sidney shared more than hunger and pain. They shared a dream. Both boys knew that life was cruel, but they also knew that laughter was powerful. When things were darkest, Charlie would begin to act out funny scenes, and Sidney would laugh until tears rolled down his face. These little moments of laughter gave them strength to keep going. At night, when they had no food and nothing to comfort them, Charlie would imagine himself on a stage. He saw lights shining, crowds laughing, and himself dancing, making people forget their troubles. These dreams were his escape. Even in his darkest nights, Charlie carried inside him a bright spark, the dream of becoming an actor. Charlie had a habit of watching people. When he walked through the streets, he carefully studied the way rich men carried themselves, the way policemen walked, the way beggars begged. He noticed how people moved their hands, how they smiled, how they spoke. He copied these movements again and again until he could perform them perfectly. His sharp eyes and playful heart turned everything he saw into a performance. London was his classroom, and the streets were his stage. It was during these years that Charlie began doing small performances on the streets. He would gather a few children or adults, make funny faces, imitate important men, and dance in silly ways. Sometimes he earned a few pennies, sometimes nothing at all. But each time, he learned something new. He learned how to make people laugh. He learned that laughter was a gift people would never refuse, even in their hardest moments. When Charlie was about 14 years old, his life took a new turn. He joined a group called the 8 Lancashire Lads. It was a group of young boys who performed clog dancing on stage. Charlie was not the strongest dancer, but he had something special. He had energy, he had expression, and he had a natural sense of timing. While other boys danced in a straight and simple way, Charlie added humor, extra steps, and little tricks that made the audience smile. For Charlie, this was the beginning of something new. For the first time in his life, he was part of a team, part of a performance that people paid to see. He traveled to different places in England, performing with the troupe. He saw new towns, new faces, and new audiences. The world was beginning to open its doors to him. But still, life was not easy. Charlie was often poor, often hungry, and always worried about what tomorrow would bring. Yet every time he stood on stage, he felt alive. He felt that he had found his place in the world. He realized that the stage was where he belonged, no matter how hard the road to success might be. At 16, Charlie got his first real acting role. He was chosen to play a small part in a stage version of Sherlock Holmes. It was not a big role, but for Charlie, it was everything. Standing on stage, dressed in costume, speaking lines in front of an audience, it was like stepping into another world. He worked hard, practiced every detail, and gave all his energy to the role. Audiences noticed him. He had a way of catching attention even in small roles. His face was full of expression, his movements were natural, and he seemed to live inside his character. People laughed when he wanted them to laugh, and they believed him when he was serious. For the first time, Charlie felt like a real actor. Imagine the change. Just a few years earlier, Charlie was a poor boy, walking the streets with empty pockets and an empty stomach. Now, at 16, he was on stage, performing in front of real audiences. From street child to theater stage, it was proof of his unstoppable spirit. Still, the road was long, and success was far away. Charlie was not yet famous, not yet rich, but something inside him was growing stronger. He had tasted the stage, and he knew he could not live without it. The boy who once performed for pennies on street corners now dreamed of performing for the whole world. Even in his darkest times, Charlie never let go of his dream. The dream of the stage gave him strength to keep moving forward. The dream of laughter gave him hope when everything else was lost. And soon, that dream would carry him across the ocean to a new world, a world that would change his life forever, America. Chapter 3. Crossing the Ocean to America. By the time Charlie was in his late teens, he was no longer just a poor boy from London. He had built a name for himself on the stage, performing small parts, acting in plays, and dancing in music halls. He had a sharp mind, quick feet, and a face that could change from tears to laughter in just a second. But still, he was only known in small theaters across England. The world did not yet know his name. That moment came in 1910, when an opportunity arrived that would change his life forever. Fred Carnot, a famous theater manager, noticed Charlie's talent. Carnot ran one of the most popular comedy troupes in England. He was always looking for performers who could make audiences laugh without saying too many words. Because in music halls, the noise of the crowd often drowned out voices. Carnot saw something special in Charlie: his expressions, his timing, his ability to tell a whole story with just his body. One evening, Carnot approached Charlie and offered him a place in his troupe. But there was more. The troupe was preparing to travel to America for a tour. For the first time in his life, Charlie would leave London, leave behind the streets where he had suffered, and cross the ocean to a land he had only dreamed about. For a poor boy who once searched trash bins for food, the invitation felt like a miracle. America was known as the land of opportunity, the land where dreams could come true. Charlie had always dreamed of making the whole world laugh, and now he was being given a chance to reach that world. In October 1910, Charlie stood on the deck of a ship, looking out at the endless Atlantic Ocean. The wind was cold, the sea was rough, but his heart was full of hope. He had never seen such vast waters, never imagined such a journey. Behind him was London, the city of his hunger and his childhood struggles. Ahead of him was America, the unknown land where his destiny waited. When the ship arrived in New York, Charlie was amazed. The tall buildings, the crowded streets, the energy of the city, it was like nothing he had ever seen before. America felt alive. People walked faster, talked louder, dreamed bigger. Charlie and the Carnot troupe performed in theaters across the country, and audiences loved him. His style was fresh, his face was unforgettable, and his ability to make people laugh without a single word stood out in every show. During one of these tours, a man from Hollywood noticed him. That man worked for Keystone Studios, a film company making short silent comedies. Silent films were becoming very popular, and studios were always searching for new talent. Keystone believed Charlie had something unique. They offered him his first role in a silent film. At first, Charlie was unsure. He was a stage actor, used to live audiences, used to hearing laughter and applause in real time. Film was different. There was no crowd, no instant reaction, only cameras and lights. But Charlie was brave. He decided to try. He knew this might be his chance to reach not just hundreds of people in a theater, but millions of people across the world. On his first day at Keystone Studios in 1914, Charlie searched for a character. He wanted something new, something unforgettable. He went into the costume room and began experimenting. He chose a pair of oversized trousers, a tight coat, and a small bowler hat. He added a cane, the kind rich men carried, but he held it in a playful way. Finally, he painted a small mustache above his lip. Then he began to walk, not straight, not proud, but with a funny little shuffle. His feet turned outward, his body leaned forward, his cane twirled in his hand. Suddenly, a new person was born, not Charlie Chaplin, the poor boy from London, but the tramp. The tramp was unlike anything the world had seen before. He was poor, he was clumsy, he was unlucky, but he was also kind, gentle, and full of hope. He could make people laugh with his silly walk, and in the next moment make them cry with his sadness. He was every poor man, every dreamer, every lost soul who still believed in life. When Charlie first appeared on screen as the tramp, audiences went wild. People laughed until their sides hurt. They cried at his struggles. They loved him instantly. Here was a man who spoke no words, yet said more than anyone could with sentences. His face, his body, his eyes, they told stories of hunger, hope, and humor. The whole world recognized themselves in him. Think of the power of that moment. Just a few years earlier, Charlie was a child on the streets of London, begging for food. Now, he was on cinema screens across America and soon across the world. People who had never heard his voice now knew his face. People who had never seen him in person now laughed with him, cried with him, and loved him. The Tramp became a global sensation. The bowler hat, the cane, the mustache, and the funny walk became symbols of joy. Children imitated him in playgrounds. Adults talked about him after watching films, and film studios begged for more. In a world before sound in movies, Charlie Chaplin became the loudest voice, without ever speaking a single word. From that moment, Charlie's destiny was clear. He was no longer just a performer, no longer just an actor. He was becoming a legend. The boy who once slept hungry in London's workhouses now made the entire world laugh. This was only the beginning of his journey in America. Greater challenges and greater successes waited ahead. But with the Tramp, Charlie had found not only a character, he had found himself. And through him, the world discovered the beauty of silent laughter. Chapter 4: Rise of a Legend. By the year 1917, Charlie Chaplin was no longer just another actor. He was the face people could not forget. Wherever his films played, theaters were full. Children copied his funny walk in the streets. Men and women spoke about him at dinner tables, and newspapers printed his picture on their front pages. In only a few short years, the boy from the poor streets of London had become the most famous comedian in America, and soon, the whole world. Hollywood, at that time, was a new and growing place. Silent films were being made every day. New actors came and went, but Charlie was different. He was not just funny. He gave audiences something more. He showed them sadness, hope, kindness, and humor all at the same time. He made people laugh, but he also touched their hearts. That was rare. That was special. By 1917, Charlie's success had exploded. Film companies knew his name could bring huge crowds. They offered him money like no one had ever seen before in Hollywood. In fact, he became the highest paid actor of his time. Imagine that. The boy who once begged for food now earned more in a week than most people earned in a lifetime. For Charlie, it was not just about the money. It was about freedom. Money gave him the chance to create films the way he wanted, without others controlling his vision. But even with all the fame, Charlie was careful. He remembered his childhood, the hunger, the cold, the workhouses. Fame did not make him forget where he came from. In fact, his struggles as a child became the very soul of his comedy. The Tramp, his famous character, always remained poor, always unlucky, yet always hopeful. People connected with that because deep inside, everyone knew what it meant to struggle. As his fame grew, Charlie began to think bigger. He did not want to just act in films made by others. He wanted to direct them, write them, and control every detail. So, with his earnings, he built his own film studio in Hollywood. This was a bold move. Most actors simply acted, but Charlie was different. He wanted full control because he believed movies could be more than just quick laughs. He believed movies could tell real stories, stories that mattered. And then came the masterpiece that proved him right, The Kid, released in 1921. The Kid was not just another comedy. It was a film filled with deep emotion. It told the story of the tramp who finds an abandoned baby and raises him as his own child. The film mixed laughter and tears in a way no one had ever done before. Audiences laughed at the tramp's silly tricks, but they also cried when the authorities tried to take the child away. It was real, it was human, and it came straight from Charlie's own memories of childhood poverty and loneliness. People who watched The Kid left the theaters with full hearts. Some said they had never laughed and cried so much in the same film. For the first time, audiences realized that movies could be more than entertainment. They could carry messages, emotions, and truths about life. Charlie Chaplin had changed cinema forever. The critics praised him, the public adored him, and Hollywood finally understood that Charlie was not just a clown. He was an artist, a storyteller, and a genius. His little tramp character, with the bowler hat and cane, became a symbol of hope for millions. Think about that moment for a second. A child who once had nothing, no father, no home, no money, was now making films that touched the world. His laughter was born from tears. His comedy was shaped by pain. And that was why people loved him. Because when they laughed at the tramp, they were also laughing at their own struggles, their own mistakes, their own sadness. Charlie gave them hope that even in suffering, joy could be found. After The Kid, Charlie's place as a legend was secure. He was not just the highest paid actor, he was the most loved. People did not simply watch his films, they felt them. His work was now more than a career. It was history. The rise of Charlie Chaplin from a poor London boy to Hollywood's brightest star was more than success. It was a miracle of human spirit. He had proven that you could fall again and again, but if you kept standing up, kept dreaming, kept believing, you could touch the sky. Audiences now laughed and cried together in theaters. For the first time, movies were not just silent pictures. They were windows into the human soul. And the man who opened that window was none other than Charlie Chaplin, the tramp who never spoke a word, yet said everything. Chapter 5: Silent Movies, Loud Emotions. The year was 1927. Hollywood was changing. For years, silent films had ruled the theaters. Audiences watched with wide eyes as characters made them laugh and cry without a single spoken word. But then, everything changed. A new invention entered the world of cinema, sound. The first talking picture, The Jazz Singer, had been released, and suddenly everyone was excited. Actors could now speak on screen. Singers could sing, and audiences could hear voices for the first time. It was the beginning of what was called the talkies. Studios rushed to add sound to their films. Many silent actors were afraid that without a good voice, their careers would end. But Charlie Chaplin was different. He had built his entire career on silence. His tramp character did not need words to speak. His body, his eyes, his walk, all told stories far more powerful than dialogue ever could. When the whole world was running toward sound, Charlie stood still. He refused to let his art be controlled by a machine. "Why should I talk?" he once said. "My comedy is in my walk, in my gestures, in my eyes. Words are not necessary." It was a brave choice. Some people called him foolish. They said his time was over. They believed audiences wanted voices, songs, and conversations. But Charlie trusted himself. He believed silence could still speak louder than words. And so, in 1931, when almost every other filmmaker was creating sound films, Charlie released City Lights, a silent film. From the very first scene, Audiences knew this was something special. The film told the story of the tramp who falls in love with a blind flower girl. She cannot see him, but she believes he is a rich gentleman because of a small act of kindness. The tramp, poor and clumsy as ever, tries everything to help her, even risking his own freedom. There were no spoken words, no dialogue, but every gesture, every look, every tear told more than words ever could. The comedy was pure Chaplin, funny, clever, and innocent. Audiences laughed as the tramp found himself in ridiculous situations, boxing in the ring, or struggling to earn money. Yet behind the humor, there was deep emotion. The heart of City Lights was love, the kind of love that sees beyond appearances. The blind girl could not see the tramp's ragged clothes or his funny walk. She only felt his kindness, and he, in turn, gave everything for her happiness. The film built up to one of the most famous endings in cinema history. After many struggles, the flower girl finally has an operation that restores her sight. She can see the world again. One day, the tramp walks past her flower shop. His clothes are torn, his face is tired, but his spirit is alive. The girl does not recognize him at first. To her, he is just a poor tramp. But then, as she gently touches his hand, she realizes who he is. That moment, when her eyes fill with tears and he smiles shyly, nervously, yet full of love, is one of the most emotional scenes ever filmed. The audience feels everything: joy, sadness, love, hope, and not a single word is spoken. When City Lights was released, it was a triumph. People laughed, people cried, and critics praised it as a masterpiece. Albert Einstein himself attended the premiere in Los Angeles and was deeply moved. The film proved that silence, when used with heart, could be more powerful than any sound. Charlie had taken a risk, and it paid off. In an age when the world demanded voices, he reminded everyone that emotions speak louder than words. His silent film shined brighter than many talking films of that time. City Lights was more than just a movie. It was a statement. It told the world that cinema was not only about technology, not only about sound or spectacle. It was about humanity. It was about the connection between the screen and the audience's heart. The success of City Lights showed that Charlie Chaplin was not just keeping up with the times. He was leading them. He reminded the world that true art is timeless. Technology changes, trends come and go, but laughter, love, and kindness remain forever. The tramp, with his bowler hat and cane, had once again proven that he could survive anything, even the arrival of sound. And in doing so, Charlie himself became more than just a star. He became a legend. Think of it this way. In a world filled with noise, one man chose silence. And in that silence, he created a sound that still echoes in our hearts today. Chapter 6: Comedy Against Tyranny. The 1930s were a dark time for the world. Across Europe, Adolf Hitler was rising to power. His Nazi regime spread fear, hate, and violence. Many artists, politicians, and ordinary people were afraid to speak out. They stayed silent, hoping the storm would pass. But one man, a comedian who had built his fame on laughter and silence, chose to stand against tyranny. That man was Charlie Chaplin. Chaplin had noticed something strange in the late 1930s. People often pointed out that he and Hitler shared a surprising physical resemblance. Both were short, both had expressive eyes, and both wore a small mustache above their lips. Of course, one used his mustache to make the world laugh, while the other used it to spread terror. Chaplin saw this contrast clearly, and he decided to use it. At a time when most of Hollywood avoided politics, Chaplin made a bold choice. He would make a film mocking Hitler and his fascist ideas. Many warned him against it. "Charlie," they said, "this is dangerous. Hitler is powerful. People may not like it." But Chaplin believed comedy had a higher purpose. Laughter, he knew, could cut through fear. Humor could reveal the truth that dictators tried to hide. So, in 1940, Chaplin released The Great Dictator. It was his first full talking film, and the world waited anxiously to see what he would say. The film told the story of two men, both played by Chaplin. One was a poor Jewish barber who looked remarkably like the dictator. The other was Adenoid Hinkle, a direct parody of Hitler. The plot was clever, but its heart was serious. Chaplin used comedy to expose the cruelty, the foolishness, and the emptiness of tyranny. Audiences roared with laughter as Chaplin's Hinkle gave ridiculous speeches in a fake German language, shouting nonsense words with wild gestures. They laughed as he danced with a giant balloon shaped like the globe, tossing it in the air as if he wanted to control the whole world. But beneath the laughter, the message was clear. Dictators may look powerful, but they are, at their core, absurd. For the Jewish barber, the story was different. He represented innocence, kindness, and humanity. He struggled, suffered, and fought to survive. In the end, through a twist of fate, the barber is mistaken for the dictator and is asked to give a speech to the nation. This moment became one of the most famous in film history. Chaplin stepped forward, no longer hiding behind silence, no longer only making faces or gestures. For the first time in his career, he spoke, and his words shook the world. He looked directly at the camera and spoke of freedom, of hope, of love. He rejected hate, greed, and oppression. "We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery," he declared. "The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, but the power they took from the people will return to the people." It was not just a film speech. It was a cry for humanity. It was Chaplin, the poor boy from London who had once known hunger and despair, speaking directly to millions of people living in fear of war. Some critics at the time were uncomfortable. They said Chaplin should not mix comedy with politics. They worried that audiences would not accept a comedian giving such a serious message. But history proved them wrong. The speech became one of the most powerful moments in cinema. Even today, more than 80 years later, it is still quoted, shared, and remembered. What made the film special was not only the speech, but the courage behind it. In 1940, America had not yet entered World War II. Many were still unsure about how dangerous Hitler truly was. But Chaplin did not wait. He used his voice before others dared to. He used his art not just to entertain, but to fight. And that was the beauty of The Great Dictator. Comedy became a weapon. Laughter became resistance. People could laugh at the dictator on screen, and in doing so, they found strength to resist the real one. Chaplin showed that humor was not weakness. Humor was power. The success of the film was immense. Audiences across the world cheered. Those suffering under dictatorships found hope. Those uncertain about the future found courage. Chaplin had proven, once again, that cinema was more than a business. It was a voice, a light, a force for good. For Charlie, this film was deeply personal. He knew what it was like to be powerless, to be poor, to be ignored by the world. He had lived through hunger, through homelessness, through despair. Perhaps that was why he could speak about freedom with such truth. He was not only an actor playing a role, he was a man who had known suffering, telling the world it could be overcome. By daring to mock Hitler, Chaplin placed himself in history not just as an artist, but as a fighter for humanity. The Great Dictator was more than a comedy. It was an act of bravery. Think about it. A silent clown who once made audiences laugh by tripping on a banana peel was now one of the loudest voices against tyranny. In the darkest times, he proved that laughter and love were stronger than fear and hate. And that, my friends, was Chaplin's greatest victory. Chapter 7: Betrayal and Exile. Fame can lift a man to the sky, but it can also bring storms that try to break him. By the 1940s, Charlie Chaplin was not only one of the most famous men in the world, he was also one of the most controversial. His films had touched millions, but his ideas, his boldness, and his refusal to stay silent about injustice made powerful enemies. During World War II and after it, America was a land of suspicion. The Cold War had begun, and fear of communism spread like fire. Politicians, journalists, and even neighbors accused each other of being un-American. For many artists in Hollywood, this became a nightmare. Some were blacklisted, some lost their careers, and even the greatest comedian in the world was not safe. Charlie Chaplin had always spoken his mind. He had defended workers. He had criticized war. He had mocked dictators. He had even refused to become an American citizen, choosing instead to remain a proud citizen of Britain. To some politicians, this was enough to make him a target. They began to paint him as dangerous, as someone who did not love America, even though America had given him his greatest success. Newspapers spread rumors. They said he was secretly a communist, even though he was not. They attacked his private life, twisting stories and making lies. The FBI kept a file on him, watching his every move. His films, once welcomed with laughter, now faced protests. Outside cinemas, angry groups shouted that Chaplin should leave. The same man who had given joy to millions was now treated as a threat. Then, in 1952, the betrayal came. Chaplin was on a ship sailing to London for the premiere of his new film, Limelight. While he was still at sea, the U.S. government announced that he would not be allowed to return unless he faced hearings about his political beliefs. It was a cruel blow. After more than 30 years of making America laugh, Charlie was exiled. He was 53 years old, with a wife and young children. Everything he had built in Hollywood, his studio, his career, his place in cinema, was taken away in an instant. The land that had once cheered him, that had crowned him the king of comedy, had turned its back. Charlie did not return. Instead, he settled in Switzerland with his wife, Una O'Neill. Ona was the daughter of famous playwright Eugene O'Neill, and though she was much younger than Charlie, she became his strength. Together they built a quiet life in a beautiful house by Lake Geneva. There, Chaplin raised his children, wrote music, and dreamed of new films. But deep inside, the wound remained. He had given the world so much laughter, yet the country that had lifted him the highest had pushed him away. For years, he lived in silence, away from Hollywood, away from the stage, away from the lights. He poured his love into his family, watching his children grow, telling them stories, playing the violin, and walking in the gardens. Still, the world had not forgotten him. His films continued to shine. New generations discovered The Kid, City Lights, and The Great Dictator. Critics began to say what should have been said long before, that Chaplin was not just a comedian, but one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. And then, in 1972, something extraordinary happened. After 20 years of exile, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences invited Chaplin back to America. They wanted to give him an honorary Oscar for his lifetime of work, for the laughter and the tears he had given the world. At first, Charlie hesitated. He was older now, his health was fragile. He feared the pain of returning to the place that had once betrayed him. But Una encouraged him, and finally he agreed. The night of April 10th, 1972, became one of the most emotional nights in cinema history. Charlie Chaplin, now 82 years old, walked slowly onto the stage of the Academy Awards in Los Angeles. As soon as the audience saw him, they rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the theater. People clapped, shouted, and cried. It was not a normal standing ovation. It lasted 12 full minutes. The longest in Oscar history. Tears filled Charlie's eyes. For so long he had lived with the pain of rejection. Now, in that moment, the world was apologizing. The same Hollywood that had pushed him away was now begging for forgiveness. The man once treated as an enemy was celebrated as a legend. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but full of gratitude. Words seem so futile, so feeble, he said. I can only say thank you for the honor of inviting me here. It was a moment of healing, not only for Chaplin, but for everyone who believed in the power of art. The boy from the streets of London, the tramp who had made the whole world laugh, had finally been welcomed home, not to America, but to the hearts of millions. The spike of this chapter was not just the ovation. It was the truth revealed. Time cannot erase greatness. Lies and politics may exile a man, but his art, his humanity, and his laughter will always return. Charlie Chaplin left the stage that night as more than a comedian, more than a filmmaker. He left as a symbol of forgiveness, of resilience, and of the timeless bond between an artist and the world. Chapter 8. The Final Act and Immortality. Every great story has an ending, but some endings are not truly an end. They become a doorway into memory, into legacy, into eternity. For Charlie Chaplin, the poor boy who grew up in the streets of London, who made the whole world laugh and cry, the final act of his life was written not on the stage or the screen, but in the quiet hills of Switzerland. After his triumphant return to America in 1972, where he received the longest standing ovation in Oscar history, Chaplin lived out his last years in peace. He was no longer the young man running around with a cane, bowler hat, and mustache. He was now an old man, with white hair, slower steps, and a body weakened by age. But his mind was still sharp, and his heart was still full of humor, music, and love. Chaplin's home, the Menor de Ban, overlooked the calm waters of Lake Geneva. It was a place of beauty, with gardens, trees, and the sound of birds filling the air. There, he spent his days surrounded by his wife, Una, and their 8 children. Family life gave him comfort. After years of exile, scandal, and political storms, he finally found what he had always longed for, a safe and happy home. He would often sit in his chair near the window, gazing at the lake, telling stories to his children, and playing the violin, the instrument he had loved since boyhood. Sometimes, visitors would come, other artists, friends, and admirers. They came not to see a clown but a master, a man who had reshaped cinema, who had turned silent gestures into universal language. But even in peace, life reminded him of its fragility. Age brought illness. His health began to decline, and he needed more care. Still, Chaplin carried on with dignity. He had once said, "Life is a tragedy when seen in close-up, but a comedy in long shot." Perhaps that was how he accepted the weakness of old age, not as a tragedy, but as another role in the long comedy of life. Then came Christmas Day, December 25th, 1977. While families across the world celebrated with joy, in Switzerland, silence filled the Chaplin home. Charlie Chaplin passed away in his sleep at the age of 88. The man who had given laughter to billions had taken his final bow. News spread quickly. From London to Los Angeles, from Paris to Tokyo, from villages in Africa to towns in South America, the world mourned. Newspapers carried the headline, "Charlie Chaplin is dead." People wept as if they had lost a friend, a father, a part of themselves. For many, Chaplin had been more than an actor. He had been a symbol of hope, of survival, of joy in the face of suffering. But even in death, his story took a strange turn. Only a few months after his burial, something shocking happened. On March 1st, 1978, thieves dug up his coffin from the cemetery near his home and stole his body. It was a crime that stunned the world. The body of Charlie Chaplin, the man who had once been homeless and unwanted, was now being held for ransom. The kidnappers demanded money from Una, his widow, but Una refused to pay. Charlie would have found this ridiculous, she said. And she was right. The idea that anyone could steal Chaplin's spirit, his laughter, his legacy, was absurd. His body might have been taken, but Charlie Chaplin himself could never be kidnapped. After weeks of investigation, the police found the thieves and recovered his body. His coffin was reburied, this time in a grave surrounded by concrete to ensure it would never be disturbed again. Even in death, Chaplin's life remained like one of his films, a mixture of tragedy and comedy, of absurdity and truth. As the years passed, the shock of his death gave way to reflection. Who was Charlie Chaplin, truly? How did a boy born in 1889 into poverty with no father and a sick mother rise to become the most loved comedian in the world? The answer lies not in luck, but in spirit. Chaplin turned hunger into humor. He turned pain into art. He turned silence into the loudest voice cinema had ever known. He made people laugh in times of despair and cry in moments of joy. He crossed borders without speaking a word. His character, the tramp, became a friend to millions, a wanderer who had nothing, yet always found a way to smile. And perhaps that is why Chaplin's legacy is eternal. He reminded us of something simple but powerful. Laughter is life. As he once said, "A day without laughter is a day wasted." Those words echo across generations, teaching us that no matter how dark the world becomes, laughter is a light we can always carry. Today, Chaplin is remembered not only through his films, but through museums, books, documentaries, and the hearts of his fans. His home in Switzerland is now a museum called Chaplin's World, where visitors walk through the rooms where he lived, see the sets of his films, and feel the presence of the man who made cinema human. And so, the final act of Charlie Chaplin is not his death, not the theft of his body, not even his reburial. The final act is immortality. His films still play. His face, with the bowler hat and mustache, is still recognized everywhere. His words still inspire. And his laughter, once born from the pain of a poor boy, still heals the world. The curtain may have fallen on December 25th, 1977, but for Charlie Chaplin, the show never ended. It continues every time a child laughs, every time a lonely person finds hope in a smile, every time a silent film flickers on a screen. Charlie Chaplin is gone, but laughter, his greatest gift, lives forever. And now, my dear friends, let me ask you, what lesson do you take from Charlie Chaplin's story? Did it inspire you? Did you learn new English words today? Remember, his life was not easy. He was hungry, poor, and alone, yet he never gave up. He kept smiling, he kept trying, and in the end, he gave joy to the whole world. That is the power of hope, of courage, and of never letting your dreams die. So I ask you, what is your dream? Maybe it is to speak English fluently. Maybe it is to travel, to create, or to share your voice. Whatever it is, do not stop. Keep learning, keep laughing, and keep believing. If Charlie could rise from hunger and pain to become a legend, then you too can rise above your struggles. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and write a comment below. Tell me, which part of Chaplin's story touched you the most? Was it his childhood, his success, his bravery, or his forgiveness? I want to read your answers, and I want us to learn together. Thank you, my friends, and see you in the next video.